Greeting to all YouTube viewers. I am Vanbert Mackenzie. I was watching a YouTube channel about the cocoa plantation of the French colony that became known as the Ivory Coast of what is now known as West Africa. According to the documentary, the country of the Ivory Coast is the largest producer of the cocoa industry. But unfortunately, who are the beneficiary of the cocoa plant industry? Is it not the people of Europe and the overseas colonies who are the beneficiary of the cocoa plant industry of the Ivory Coast, or of any of the countries of the land of Ham that is known today as Africa, that produce cocoa? To show the stupidity and the foolish mentality of many Hamite people of the land of Ham, known today as African people and black people. From what the documentary showed, there are many Hamite men of the Ivory Coast who use many of their poor young children from the Ivory Coast and neighboring countries as slave labor, working for them for nothing, without any form of schooling or healthcare facilities to take care of their suffering children's needs, who they use as their slaves to make themselves to become rich men from the suffering of their poor children, to sell the cocoa product to the European and the European American market. So these Hamite men from the Ivory Coast and in other countries of the land of Ham, who use their poor suffering people as slaves to make money, because many of them are poor. So many of these foolish Hamite men are a sellout and a stumbling block to the progress of their own people betterment, to keep many of their own people down in poverty and ignorance, while they become rich men from the European and the European American market. What many of these foolish political leaders of the land of Ham do not realize, that they are related to each other as family that came down from Ham and his 4 sons and their grandchildren, who gave birth to this nation of people who are known today as the African people and the so-called black people. My question to many of these Hamite people who see themselves as African people and black people: when are they going to wake up from being foolish people to let everyone to use us for their own gain and benefit? I must point out that if the cocoa plantation were in Europe or China, they would not allow any Hamite people to come into their country to use them and their children to get their cocoa cheap, and by so doing selling out and using many of their young children as slave labor to satisfy us, as many of these foolish Hamite leaders of the land of Ham do, to make money. The funny thing about it, many Hamite men of the Ivory Coast who see themselves as educated political leaders and governmental officials of the European system don't seem to have any problem of the slavery of their many young brothers and sisters of the Ivory Coast to make money. Just imagine if many of these people of the land of Ham was not so selfish, greedy, and foolish. Many of the wealth of the land of Ham should go to uplift many of their poor brothers and sisters from out of povertiness. By so doing, it would help to build up the continent into an industrial nation, because of the wealth of the land that so many other people want for themselves. From the slavery colonial days, many Hamite people from the land of Ham has been foolishly selling out their own people to the colonial conquerors, by so doing destroying us as a race of people. In my opinion, the cocoa plant industry of the Ivory Coast, with the rest of the other natural resources of the various countries of the land of Ham, should be nationalized by a responsible government who has the interests of their own brothers and sisters and children at heart, to uplift them from out of poverty, and not just to benefit from a few greedy political leaders who do not have the care and love for their own people at heart, but just to make money. Let us take for argument's sake the Shemite people of what is now known as Asia and the Japhethite people who are known today as the people of Europe. Whatever raw material they have in their lands and what they have stolen from other people, they would take back their stolen raw material to Europe or China to be developed in the interest of their own people, to build up their brothers and sisters' standard of living from out of poverty. To give one an example of what I'm speaking about, according to a book that is called Rape of a Continent, that was written by Mark Stage, the Dutch established what became known as South Africa, that they did take away from the power of the Portuguese in 1600 AD, that was known before by the Portuguese as Cape of Good Hope. This Dutch settlement and their occupation became known as South Africa. They found diamond and gold that was found in a land area that became known as Kimberley. Due to the diamond and gold that was found in South Africa, make what became known as Holland or the Netherlands as the diamond and gold capital of the world, because of these Dutch settlers as well as the French and the British settlers who came later and made themselves to become rich people from the conquest and settlement of the land of Ham. In my opinion, if many of these political leaders of the land of Ham was not suffering from stupidity, slavery and colonial mentality and inferiority complex that do perplex many of our Hamite political leaders' mind, to become puppets for the Chinese and other European colonizers, as well as the Ishmaelite people of what is now known as the Saudi Arabian people. They will see to it that all their raw materials are nationalized 95% in the interest and benefit of their own brothers and sisters, to create job opportunities and to uplift many of their own people from out of poverty, and to create better living conditions for their people. But these colonial rulers take the natural resources that was put there by Yahweh to benefit themselves and their own families and friends, rather than to uplift their people from out of poverty of the land of Ham, who are living there. Just think of it. The Chinese and the Indian people of what is now known as Asia were at one time under European colonial rulership, who they used to walk upon, spat upon, and who they did consider less than human beings. Many of the Chinese and Indian people during the time of 1600 AD and 1900 AD were struggling poor people who were under the hands of the Gentile people of what is now known today as Europe. But today they are no longer the kicking stone of oppression of the people of Europe, because today many of the countries of Europe send many of their technology to be developed in Asia, because it is more economical and profitable for them to do so, because these people are no longer their object of prey as though they were during the 1600 to the 1900 AD. So now, Because many of these countries of Asia stick together and strive upon the European technology that was exposed to them, to make many of them to become the industrial people many of them are today. So many of these people of Asia of today don't realize that they were at one time dominated and exploited by many countries of Europe. So now, we the people of who are just coming out from out of the European colonial rulership of our lands and its people, need to stick together and help to educate and to build up our people's mind to come from out of this slavery and colonial mentality that many of our people are suffering from. As I had mentioned before in one of my videos, that charity that the scripture spoke about, that means love, starts with a family of people. So we as a people of must learn to love and help each other and to encourage many of our own people to try to better themselves from a business and an economical point of view, so as to create employment for many of our struggling people, so that many of my people can stop from depending on the European and the Chinese job market to put bread on their tables. Because many of these people are mostly interested in looking out for their own people to better their own people's standard of living. I was watching a documentary on YouTube about the land of Kush, known today as Sudan. From what I have gathered from watching this video, because of the vast amount of oil that was found in Sudan, it have caused the country to be split into two different countries, with the Ishmaelite people who are known today as the Saudi Arabian people, with the European man blood running through their veins, who have control over the northern part of the country. And because of the oil because of the oil that they have found, use their army to kill and run off many people of their land to be explored for more oil. This caused the country to split into two different countries, where the other Hamite people control the southern part of the country, where most of the oil is found. Many of these Hamite political leaders who control the southern part of Sudan, from what the documentary explained, many of these political leaders take the oil money for themselves, friends, and their families, while they use the army to drive off many poor people from off the land, because they want foreign investors to come in to explore for more oil. So what I saw from this documentary, many poor and struggling people of Sudan have to turn to pick leaf for their food to eat, to survive, because they have no land to grow anything, plus the war factor where millions of people have lost their life. As I mentioned before, that many of these political leaders of the land of are suffering from slavery and colonial mentality, who has no love and pity for many of their poor, struggling, and suffering people who are under their control, but only for their own pockets, their friends, and families. In my opinion, if many of these Hamite political leaders of the land of were smart people, they would see to it that all their natural resources to be nationalized and developed in the interest of their own people betterment. By doing so, this nationalization with the right leader of the country would create free medical system and free educational system and better housing conditions for many of their poor people of these places. If these natural resources were in the land of Europe and in the land of the Chinese people, and they did not have the technology to develop their raw material like many of the countries of the land of do, they would see to it that all of their natural resources to be nationalized and their money to stay in their country to better their own people's standard of living. But I'm afraid that when it comes down to many Hamite political leaders of the land of Ham, they do not have this kind of mentality toward their own people like that of many of the people of Europe and the Chinese people of Shem for their own people betterment, but only to rob and steal, to keep many of their brothers and sisters down, begging for bread and biting the dust, while they have millions of dollars of their poor people money that they have stolen, stuck away in some overseas European banks. Many of these Hamite political leaders who have money stuck away in some European banks do not realize that if they should die, all of their stolen money would go to benefit the European communities rather than their own people where they take their money from. I also want to point out that I have been watching quite a lot of Nigerian movies on YouTube. My question to many Nigerian women and other women of the land of Ham: why do they have to put on these European false wig on their head and face makeup, and many of whom try to bleach out their skin color just to look like a European woman of Europe? Some of these women of the Nigerian movies put on blonde wigs, brunette wigs, red-head wigs, and ginger wigs, just trying to run away from themselves. Some of these sisters from the motherland and elsewhere even go so far to have hairdressers to weave into their natural hair ropes of different colors, trying to run away from themselves, from the way they were created by Yahweh when they were born and came into this world. Many of these women of the land of Ham don't realize that all they are doing is to make the wig companies richer by trying to run away from themselves of who they are. Because of their brainwashing from the slavery colonial days and also by the European television system to see beauty from a European people point of view. This means that a beautiful woman must look like a European woman with blonde hair, red hair, ginger or brunette hair, with a lot of false makeup, as if to say that they were not made up properly by Yahweh when they were born and came into this world by His might and His power. But the reason for this slavery mentality that do affect many of our Hamite sisters' mind, it is because from the slavery colonial days, many Hamite people were taught to see beauty from a European point of view. This means that a beautiful woman must have blonde hair, brunette hair, ginger hair, red-head hair, with blue eyes before she can be considered to be a beautiful woman. Also, many of our young Hamite girls were given European dolly baby with blonde hair, red hair, ginger hair, with blue eyes as their toy to play with, rather than they were given a dolly baby looking like themselves to play with. That did have a great impact on many of our young girl children's mind when they were growing up. Also, another factor that have a very great impact on many of our Hamite women of today's minds. It is because many of the beauty contest show is mostly run by the people of Europe, and most of the time they would always pick a European looking woman as the most beautiful woman of the world. To give one an idea of how much this slavery mentality teaching has a great impact on many of our Hamite sister mind of today. Whenever a Hamite person is having a beauty contest show among their own people, they would always pick a brown light-skinned woman that is near in skin color to the people of Europe. As the winner of this beauty contest show, also to show the penetration of this slavery mentality that did affect many of our Hamite people mind of today. When I was growing up in the island of Jamaica in the 50s, if a man or a woman was to bring a light brown skinned person to their mother or their father as their future mate, this light brown skinned person would be more accepted into the family than a darker skinned person would. Also, many Hamite mothers of Jamaica used to tell their sons or their daughters to look to marry a brown skinned woman or a brown skinned man to be their wife or husband, because they would have beautiful children and would go through life much easier. I'm quite sure that this sort of slavery mentality teaching was taught to many Hamite people here in the United States and in other European slavery colonial world, where our ancestors were taken as slaves and leave us behind. It was the same way in the 50s when I was growing up in Jamaica. A light brown skinned person could easily get a job in the bank or in the post office in comparison to that of a dark skinned person. So one can see from what I've written why many of our Hamite women of the Caribbean, the United States, and also in the land of Ham itself, always trying to run away from themselves by buying wigs and all sort of chemical makeup that was brought about by the people of Europe and also by the Chinese people to make money from them who are trying to run away from themselves. To look beautiful in the eyes of the European world of today from their point of view. What makes it so bad? Looking many times of our Hamite sisters, many of whom is of a dark skin complexion with red lips, that was brought about by the people of Europe as a part of their fashion of makeup, that many of their colonial people have copied as a part of their beauty with red lips. I also want to point out that many times looking at these Nigerian movies, it's all about sexual immorality, abortion clinic, smoking and drinking that came down from the slavery days of the people of Europe that many of us have copied, that was foreign to many of our ancestors who have gone by. I want to point out to many of the people of the land of Ham that it is a known fact that smoking and drinking of liquor and soda is no good for one health, that many of the time lead to cancer and other health related sickness. I also want to mention that in many of these Nigerian movies I was watching, it's all about lesbianism as a way of life to capture many of our young girls' minds that it's okay to do these things. I want to point out to many Hamite people who might watch my videos that these doing are destruction from Yahweh to many women who do these things. It was because of sexual immorality, pleasure, and carefree living why Yahweh destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah of the land of Canaan and many Hamite kingdom of the ancient world, because of carefree living that is of Satan the devil that do affect many Hamite people minds of today. I must point out that many people might not like this video of mine, but the truth have to be told to wake up some of these Hamite sisters' minds who are sleeping and dreaming and trying to run away from themselves to look like the people of Europe from their foolish mindset. So again, YouTube, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to elaborate on some of these things, which is reality. And as I said, Though it may be offensive to some people, but the truth have to be told, and you cannot get away from truth. Truth is truth. Thank you. Take care.